Hello, friends. Today I'm joined again by Professor McCoy, or as he's better known, Vincent. We're going to be talking about some recent current events, some unfortunate events, some sad events, but there's a lot of things happening around that are very pertinent to the faith. So we're going to be discussing that today. If you want to introduce yourself, Vincent.
Yeah, hello again. I'm Professor McCoy or Vincent McCoy or whatever you like to call him. Um, and today I guess we're going to be talking a little bit about the tragic and horrible death of Charlie Kirk. Some things that some topics that it's going to bring up for a cultural and political and philosophical discussion. Um, not to be callous about it, but
Yeah,
there are always things uh, that even tragic events can bring up that are worth talking about, um, and that'll still be worth talking about even once the tragedy kind of fades into the background. So thanks
yeah,
for doing it.
yeah, certainly. And thank you for coming on as well.
Hmm.
I'm glad to have you on again. It was a fun conversation last time. I'm hoping to it'd be another good one. It's unfortunate under these
Absolutely.
circumstances. It's a very sad happening. I guess to start, we should talk about who Charlie Kirk was. You
Hmm.
might know about more about him than I do. Honestly, I was only very I was only aware of him very cursory. Before the whole thing happened, I knew his name. I think he had been on Timcast IRL a couple times, and
Hmm.
I might have seen him there. A couple places here. I probably saw a few of his clips, but aside from just like the name and a brief association with him doing college talks. I didn't really know too much about him. I've actually kind of been binging a lot of his talks since then, and really realized I kind of missed out on a really great guy and a lot of wealth of information from him that I wasn't watching when he was still alive, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a similar experience, although I was a little bit more familiar with him throughout his career, I suppose, short as it was, unfortunately. He really, as far as I remember, really only came onto the scene after I had already graduated from undergraduate. But still being in the university environment since then, I have been pretty aware of what he and Turning Point USA have been doing. Um, and I have watched a lot of the over the years. I've watched a lot of these campus appearances, these debates, these. Um, it's not changed my mind that he does, but it's a really similar thing.
Yes, Crowder.
He and Crowder
Something
had a really
similar,
similar
yeah.
idea, um, and I
Not
think
sure who did it
that's
first.
uh, right. I actually don't know offhand, but they've both been doing that sort of thing, just going to college campuses, having conversations, and just sort of letting people confront them with ideas that are radically different from their own. And they've been both doing this for a long time. Um, and something I heard in the last few days is that the reason that Crowder stopped doing those is out of security concerns.
Yeah,
And I mean,
that's interesting, but I believe it for
you see
sure.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, for those who aren't aware, we're recording this pretty shortly after, within a week of his
Yeah,
assassination.
it'll be the 1 week tomorrow, 1 week
Right.
anniversary tomorrow.
Hmm.
Um, and definitely, if you're watching this, even if it's a long time after, please keep him and his wife, and especially his children, in
Yeah.
prayer. Honestly, just tragic. Thinking about his son and daughter. It's just that's not something any kids have to go through, or the wife, his wife. I'm not sure what her name is honestly, but
Erica. Erica
yeah.
Kirk.
Erica, that's right. Yeah,
Hmm.
I did watch her respond or her statement that
Hmm.
was the other day, and moving. And honestly, just watching his talks and one thing I like about him versus Crowder is giving some more background on him. Just as I've been binge watching and going over his old posts and Twitter feed and whatnot, and just seeing his heart for Jesus and
Hmm.
passion to see people saved. And I love just watching him talk about things. Crowder's good, but Crowder's not a Christian. He presents these things from a very just matter of fact way. Whereas I really like watching Charlie Kirk's videos and seeing how he'd be talking about transgenderism or homosexuality, and he would talk about it in a way that was very much you could see his heart for the person that he wasn't just trying to win a debate. He had a love for the person he was talking to and wanted to see him or her convert and be saved. And he would always bring Jesus into it. It's amazing how often he would bring Jesus into his conversations and debates and talk about
And
reasons for the faith. I
and
just
I will
found out.
say, not in a not in a hostile way or not in a polemical way, or
Right,
not even
right.
necessarily in what we would think of as an evangelical sort of way. He was always very invitational when he would
Yeah.
bring up Jesus, when he would bring up
Yes,
Christianity.
indeed.
It was
And
this
honestly,
is he would have this attitude of, this is what's so fundamentally important to me, and I understand that might not be important for you, but I think it should be. But even if it's not, we can still
yes,
talk, right? We can still have this conversation, even if we don't have
right.
this shared common ground. And I think that all of that put together is just a brilliant evangelical tool, a brilliant testimony.
Yeah, there's a lot. I personally, just watching him, realize I can learn and apply and just be a better person myself and how I present things and how I talk to people. Just from his demeanor and presentation is just top notch for sure. And going through his Facebook posts, even it's this constant or Twitter feed. I guess I don't know if he had Facebook or not, but Twitter feed, is constantly talking about the gospel and
Mhm.
inviting people to Jesus and to become Christians. It's just really really inspiring, very inspiring life, just from what I've seen. And um, again, I wish I had followed him while he was still alive. I think I would have really enjoyed his uh, um, talks. And for
Mhm.
more interesting, from a more personal thing too, I found out recently he was being mentored by Dr. Frank Turk, who
Mhm.
was a frequent teacher at my school. I've met Dr. Turk a couple times and
Really?
spoken with him, and Dr. Turk is great. There was
Mhm.
some unfortunate conspiracy theories that Dr. Turk had some involvement with the shooting, and there was absolutely no way those were true. It was just complete utter
I've
nonsense.
heard nothing of the sort,
Turk is a great man.
and I'm going to
Yeah,
assume I'm going to assume it's nonsense. That said, we
it
are
is.
close
It
to the
is.
event. We are close to the event. I don't want to. I'm not. I'd like for this discussion to be more or less perennial. I don't want to speculate at all, because what we know so
Yeah,
far is still shrouded in all sorts of mystery, and I'm
it's
sure
true, and
facts
there's a
will come
lot
out
we
as
don't
we go.
know.
But
Yeah,
for
yeah.
now, we don't know
I
much.
can say with absolute confidence that conspiracy theory is completely bunk. But yeah, there is a lot we don't know, um, and it's interesting. Just even the text messages that were released, there's questions about that, but that's not what
Mhm.
we're here to talk about as much. I
Yeah, who
think the
knows?
speculation there is we can go down a lot of rabbit holes. For the purposes of this video, I think we're just going to go with the official narrative
Yeah,
and stick to that, which is more or less where I think I land anyway.
yeah. I will leave the wild speculation to Twitter.
Yes,
That's what Twitter's
indeed.
for.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Um.
So, in the wake of this whole thing,
Mhm.
we have a lot of people talking about how we should respond, and there's two very prominent responses that are coming up, particularly from government, which is why it's
Mhm.
worth talking about, and it's being questioned. Is this legitimate or not? And I think we can make for the record that you and I, at least I'll speak for myself, I am not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat, and I am not coming at this from a perspective of only watching my news from Fox News. I don't have Fox
Mhm.
News goggles on. I'm very much a radically non or apolitical person. I like to say, I'm an anarchist,
Right.
so libertarian anarchist. So, my views.
Likewise,
I don't like Republicans.
we're more or less on the same page here. I think
Yeah,
I'm technically registered as a Republican, sometimes to my deep shame.
yeah,
Florida does have closed primaries, so
same.
so
So
I can vote. But
I'm registered Republican as well because there's no point in being registered anything else. The
right,
Democratic Party, the votes don't matter in the primaries for Democratic Party. So even if I like the candidate, it doesn't really make a difference. The super delegates choose everything, and the Libertarian Party, you really don't have much say unless you're a delegate. So.
hmm
The only party where voting in the primary counts is Republican, so it's just practical. Plus, if I was to ever run again, I did hold local office for a little bit. If I was to ever do that again, I'd probably do so as a Republican. But yeah, maybe not. I don't know. But so it's practical to keep it that way. But as far as my actual philosophy is concerned, I don't like the Republican Party. I don't like conservatism. I'm not a conservative. I like conservatives, but I don't like conservatism as a
hmm
philosophy. So we're not coming at this. I think both of us with a bias, and people are
right.
clear. Like we're not trying to say
Well,
like we're
bias is
not
on the
just trying to
table.
demonize the other side because Republicans
I'm
are the other side too.
I'm relatively temperamentally conservative, right?
Yeah,
My instincts are to the right, but philosophically, I have a lot of differences with the right wing, with the Republican Party, with conservatives in general. So I think that this is not just necessarily going to be I agree with everything Charlie Kirk said, because I mean, no, of course not. Or even really the core pieces of his ideology. I think we differ greatly, but I think that is that speaks to the core of, I think, what he was doing,
Yeah.
which is reaching across every aisle that he can find, and he's been doing that for years.
Hmm.
And so I think that's it's an additional testimony that a couple of anarchist libertarians are complimenting and talking so much about this probably the most prominent and significant Republican political activist of at least this last election cycle. So,
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say as a preemptive on ourselves, I probably speak for both of us, and I don't want to speak for you unless you're welcome to agree or disagree. But for myself, I also would say that my libertarianism and my anarchism, and my politics in general, are less my politics and more an extension of my faith. I would say I'm a libertarian and I'm an anarchist not because I politically came to a decision, but because my Christian morals, the teachings of the faith, as I understand them, lead me to that. So this isn't just a political position. This is really my faith positioning, and that's why I think it's important to talk about on my channel, which largely is faith topics. And though I leave it open to politics, but only insofar as the faith touches on them on my channel. So with that all being said, you're welcome to agree or disagree. I assume
more
you're probably on the same page.
more or less likewise. Yeah,
Yeah.
I no, I'll caveat that, and because I'm a philosopher and I'm a scholastic philosopher, and so distinctions are my bread and butter. So I'll caveat that a little bit and say that I don't think that it is I don't think that libertarian anarchism is a necessary outpouring of Catholic doctrine per se, but that it is highly consonant with the church's historical moral theology. Yada,
Yeah.
yada. A lot of this is stuff we talked about last time, though. So
Yeah.
if you haven't
It's
seen
the
that,
it's the logical
link in the description.
conclusion.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's logical conclusion, but other people that are reasonable and good,
Mhm.
faithful Christians and Catholics come to different conclusions.
Right.
So we are in the realm of free to disagree. There are saints who have agreed with us, and
Mhm.
blesseds and good Christians who have agreed with us, and there are good Christians and saints who have disagreed with us at this point. And the church has not condemned our position. If it did, my faith comes first. So
Mhm.
that's I definitely will say that very loud and clear. Like my faith comes before my politics that are political extension of my faith. So if the faith changes, if the faith condemns not what it changes, but if it condemns my conclusions, then I'm wrong. I'm wrong. That's all it comes down to,
Must
and
be right.
I'll
Yeah.
change.
Mhm.
But so that all being said, the big question today, there's two things coming up. Pam Bondi has talked about banning hate speech, and then of course, this has been a big with the last administration and now this administration talking about going after those who are inciting violence.
Mhm.
And I think you and I are probably going to agree on the hate speech topic. So that might be a quick one if we want to dive into that first,
Right.
or
So
if
I
you say,
think I'll dive straight into it. I think that Pam Bondi is the worst Trump pick out of both administrations, and that even includes John Bolton, whose mustache has launched 1,000 warheads. So, um, I, and I speak as a Floridian. She was the AG of Florida before she was U.S. Attorney General, and she was really bad
yeah, I didn't
here
realize
too.
that. That tells you how much I was following. I did not realize that.
Yeah, no, she was
But
really bad here too. She was actually one of the prominent proponents of red flag laws. She
oh
was a big
boy,
defender. She was a big defender of the big cities lockdowns and things like that. She was really bad for a long
yeah,
time. So this doesn't surprise me. Um,
yeah.
at least coming from her. And I will say, thankfully, she's gotten a lot of pushback that I've seen, at least so far. Even from sort of
Yeah, it
political
seems like even
allies.
conservatives are like, no. So, oftentimes the Republican administration comes out and does X or Y awful thing, and the Republicans all just jump on board. And for once, it's like even the normie Republicans and conservatives, it's like, no, that's too far. We're not doing that. And I'm very pleased to see people kind of thinking. And there's been a lot of that from this administration, really, and it's a pleasant surprise. The Trump. Trump with the Epstein files, Trump with the
Hmm.
vaccine, Trump with and Trump administration now with hate speech. A lot of his supporters have given pushback to that, and that's not typical in the history of Republican base, the conservative base, usually will just go along and get along with whatever the president says. And I'm very pleased to see kind of that independent thinking and critical analysis coming back to the party. Maybe it's the younger generation. I'm not sure that as younger conservatives are growing up, they're a little more independent, and libertarians are a little.
I mean,
you got a little libertarian streak in them.
I think so, and I think a lot of that is just that they're tired of Republican politics as usual, and as it has been for our entire lives, at least. And I think, I mean, honestly, I think Charlie Kirk did a lot for that too.
Yeah.
Fine, he wasn't a libertarian, but he got people thinking carefully, and that leads you in a certain direction, you know.
And he had strong words about hate speech, the idea of hate speech. I mean, he had a number of posts he talks about how it's not a thing, you shouldn't have it as a law.
Yeah.
But you know,
I will say though,
why, though,
you said normie Republicans are mostly not going along with it. So I just went on my Facebook page and I just checked on a couple of the normiest Republicans who I'm friends with. And so far of the two I checked, it's 50-50.
Okay.
So
that's better than under Bush. That's way better than under Bush.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's that's I mean, Bush did everything Clinton did and more and worse, and the Republicans are pretty much all like, it's great when we do it. So like having even half, even 3/4 is a quarter. I mean to say is a really good improvement for the party. I think the Libertarian Party really has rubbed off on or libertarianism, not the party. The party sucks, but
I'm so glad the Libertarian Party hasn't rubbed off on anyone.
Yes, thankfully. Yes, thankfully.
Yeah.
But let's talk about hate speech. Why we both agree it's not a crime.
Right.
It shouldn't be a crime. But why shouldn't it be a crime? We might have to get into some first principles with this, but I don't want to start, or if you want to start.
Yeah, well, I mean, most simply and straightforwardly, there's no assignable victim, right? There's no assignable harm done to a particular victim, and by assignable harm, we mean a harm which is observable, which is direct, and which is causal. Right, and hate speech fails on all three of those. Right, it is indirect insofar as it is simply you speaking, at least in a lot of these cases. Right, even in the cases of that we would, I think, rightly call disgusting and horrible and ought not to be said. Yeah. Things like these celebrations of Charlie's death and things like that. Right. Sure, that is hurtful in a sense. Right. If I would absolutely not want to see that. Those sorts of things said about my friends or family, but also
they're just about anyone. I mean,
right?
Even when people on the left have died, and even like
but I think there's
celebrating John McCain's death, and I thought that was abhorrent. I don't like John McCain.
Well, I think that it's. I think there's a difference between. I think there's a difference between noticing that it's wrong, which I think we all absolutely should, and even sort of feeling a sort of just a disgust with people thinking that way and talking that way. That is, I think, to give the left their credit, I think that is different from the emotional impact of having it said about somebody you personally know and love and care about, right? Like I am upset to some degree by these ghoulish leftists celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, but not in the same way that must be upsetting to his family, you know?
For sure. Right. Yeah, I mean it's a totally different animal here.
But even still, right? And this is the key: these people are not directing these comments in a sort of harassing way, because you can make an argument for harassment as being aggression, right? If people were repeatedly sending Erica Kirk these hateful messages in a way that she couldn't, block them or tune them out, right?
Yeah,
that might be a different story, right? That would essentially be a kind of trespass, if you want to think of it that way. But if you're just sort of shouting it into the ether of the internet and hitting send tweet, that's not the same thing at all. Right? So it's not right. Directed. It's not specific. I forget what order I did the other two, the other two requirements, but it is not observable. The actual harm is not observable, right? It has to be subjectively self-reported, the harm. Right. If I say I'm emotionally traumatized by these things that you said on Twitter, or even these things that you messaged me, or these things that you told me in person, or whatever the case might be. No third party can observe that. It's impossible. It is purely internal to me. And any action that I do in response, even if I begin weeping in response to it, which might even be an appropriate response for some people in some circumstances, whatever the case might be, that is not the harm that is being reported. Right? It's the emotional trauma that's you can't see, you can't measure. Right? Then the third part is that it's causal. And this is, I think, the key. This is the biggest thing, and I think this will apply to our next sort of topic for discussion, this incitement question. If you assume that words can have these harmful effects, and I don't mean that they can be an occasion for something negative happening. There's a big difference there. But these words can actually cause psychological harm. You are eliminating the agency of the alleged victim. Right? What I mean by that is, if you say something and that causes me to do something or think something in a way that is more than simply instinctual, right? Because if you were to say, "Hey, don't think of a pink elephant," well, I'm probably gonna think of a pink elephant. Or
yeah, I'm thinking of too. Another scenario would be like you're balancing something delicate, and I jump up and scream in your ear real quick, and you're not expecting it, and it causes you to drop it. It sounds like your instincts. I didn't make you drop it, but I definitely caused it. It's not like I owned your agency, but you're also impulse or reacting in a way to jump when someone jumps up at you. So I can think of a couple scenarios with that. But
in a case like that, I think we can be a little precise there. That I think that you didn't, in that case, you didn't make me drop it. You dropped it for me, in a sense, right? Because you triggered a subconscious reflex. Right? It would be the same kind of thing as bumping into someone and then causing them to fall over, right? Yeah. They didn't. It would be. It's the whole thing of if someone grabs your hand and starts punching you with your own hand and say, "Well, stop hitting yourself," right? Well, you're not, right? It's the same sort of thing. But if we assume that that's what's going on with hate speech, we have to assume that the emotional and cognitive responses to other people's speech are determinate, and they're not up to you, the one responding to them. And that greatly eliminates the rational agency of the people involved. It's significantly dehumanizing, and to a great extent. I don't like that. I don't like to see that sort of thing, because that can go in dangerous places. That can go in dangerous directions as well.
No, that makes sense. I think just jumping back before we get too much into incitement, I have my own just thoughts on hate speech itself. Because I think I would come at it from a different angle than you did.
Go for it.
Not that I disagree with you per se, just that I would come to a different view. And I think you probably agree with me on this, but as libertarians, generally libertarians do not believe in freedom of speech as a right. It's not inherent. There's a positive right called the freedom of speech
right,
Constitution. But that's a right that is positively granted by the government that doesn't exist in natural law. In natural law, there's a thing as free speech. Rather, there's property rights. And
you could say that there is a right to free speech in the sense of I have the right to say what I want using my body and my property. But you can explain the difference between that and what we conventionally mean by free speech. Yeah.
And most people would say, well, you can say what you want without consequence. And they'll take it to different degrees. Some will say you can say what you want without consequence from your employer, without consequence from organizations that you may work with or under, or without consequence from the government. And there's different degrees people will take it as. The First Amendment protects speech from being retaliated against by the government. It does not protect you from private organizations firing you when you say something terrible, or hiring you for saying something nice, or you can't stop someone from disassociating with you because they don't like what you said. So a store is more than welcome to close the window when you come up to the cashier line and say, sorry, we're closed, go elsewhere, because they don't like you. And that's not a violation of freedom of speech. So but the government can't do that. And that's what the First Amendment is. In a natural law, yes, there's something very close to freedom of speech. I wouldn't personally call it that because I think it's too. I think the waters are too muddled from discourse on freedom of speech from a positive little sense. We can talk about
Mhm.
if you anyone's interested in positive versus negative law, we talked about that in the last episode. Link in the description. But I think the positive law has muddled the water of talking about the negative right to free speech that is more of an extension of property rights. If I'm on my property, obviously, or using my property to say things, um, it's true the government cannot retaliate against me,
Mhm.
and in some sense, no one can harm me. No one can aggress against me. There's no aggression that comes from speech.
Right.
If
But
I'm
I mean
if I'm saying things people don't like,
that just sort of rolls into the whole you have a right not to be aggressed against. Yeah,
yes,
it's not
exactly.
an independent
So,
right. Is what you're getting at, yeah.
now, again, because there is no actual right for freedom of speech, you can't say anything you want without retaliation.
Mhm.
If I make a very specific threat against you, and you and I are in close proximity to each other, and I say something like, "I have this here weapon, I'm about to do this here thing to you," you have every right to then engage in preemptive defense.
Mhm.
Because I have made it obviously, unless I'm obviously joking. Of course, there's some context there. But if I'm suddenly angry at you, and I am making it clear I'm about to harm you, and I specifically say I'm about to harm you, then you have every right to respond to that speech in kind with retaliatory force. So there's no freedom of speech in that context, but
Can I
but
push
there
back
is
on that a
freedom of
little
speech
bit?
in the context. Oh yeah,
I'm going to push back on that very slightly because you're right.
yeah,
You're absolutely right about the circumstance. But I think that we can be a little bit more precise about that in a way that doesn't even really need to involve the question of freedom of speech, right? If you provide a credible threat, if you say that I have this weapon and I intend to shoot you with it or harm you with it or whatever, then what I'm retaliating against or what I'm defending against is not your speech. It's the foreseen action that you have told me about, right? It's
yes,
the same. I would have the same recourse if I merely rationally anticipated you using the weapon against me, right? If you,
yeah.
yeah,
My face is up. My face is up, and you dodge it and punch.
yes,
It's like
I don't have to
you're
wait
not.
until you make contact.
In one sense, you're not making a retaliatory strike because you didn't get hit in the first place. In the other sense, you are making a retaliatory counter strike to a broadcast action.
Hmm. Right.
So yeah, you're right, yeah. So there's definitely some nuance here, but in
So
an
maybe
absolutist
I put it this way,
sense,
right? I am responding in that sense to the information, not to the fact that you have conveyed the information to me. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. And information presented in a credible way.
Right.
Because of
Yes. That's
course,
important.
someone can whisper in your ear and say, "Hey, Philip poisoned your drink he just gave you." It's like, well, yeah, but who are you? Like, what do you think? Like, but versus like I'm actually broadcasting and doing this and telling you. Um, so in an absolutist sense, there's no such thing as a right to freedom of speech, but
Hmm.
there's something very close to that in the natural law as an extension of property rights,
Hmm.
and so that's where libertarianism tends to fall. And it looks very close to freedom of speech. A lot of people say, "Oh, you don't believe in freedom of speech?" And shut up. It's like, well, it's not like that though. If I'm on your property, you can kick me off for something I say that you don't like. But if I say something that your friend doesn't like, they can't kick me off, not unless you agree with them to do so.
Right.
Same vice versa. If you're on my property, you can't kick me off for me saying something that you don't like. You can leave, but you can't kick me off my property for it. But I can kick you off for something I don't like that you say or
Hmm.
do. So it's who has the right. So if we're on Facebook, let's say, and I'm saying something terribly hateful, um, the government can't come after me, and neither can you. But Facebook has every right to ban me for it.
Hmm.
Assuming there's no government involvement. That gets tricky when there's
Right.
government funding to an organization like that.
Right.
But
And when they're
but
doing all
yes,
the kinds of things that they've been doing over the last few years, and
yes.
yeah.
Supposing an actual free market, which Facebook has not been operating,
Right.
they would have every right to ban me in that context for saying something they don't like. That
Hmm.
doesn't matter how true or right or good it is. If they think it's hateful, if they just don't like it, they have a right to ban me for it. because it's their property. In a free market context, not how it's been.
Right.
Because how it's been has been a very muddled circumstance. We're not going to get into another episode,
Mhm. Well,
perhaps. But
and
um,
assuming that they haven't made some kind of explicit agreement not to, right? So
yes,
if their
that's true
terms of
too.
service says
And
these are the things that you can say, and you say them and they ban you anyway, then that is a kind of fraud, right?
yeah, and a good
Yeah.
example here's this too. On top of that, like, so you have controlling ownership in some sense of your Facebook profile.
Mhm.
So when you post something, if I were to comment on your post, maybe you posted something about maybe you posted one of your newest Deliverance Kingdom Come videos, and
Mhm. Mhm.
your wife happened to have stepped in and talked to you for a minute. And I said something insulting about your wife.
Mhm.
You're not violating any rights to my free speech by deleting my comment, let alone banning me. You have every right to do that.
Mhm.
It's not like it. I see people complain when you delete comments, and it's like, oh, not you particularly, but in general.
Yeah.
Oh, you so much for free speech. It's like it has nothing to do with. There's no one's rights are being violated.
I don't have to
Being
listen.
deleted. The person who wants a profile can delete the comments. It's their property, or at least their ownership, to sense that they're controlling that property, they're controlling stake in it.
Mhm.
So it's property rights, not an absolute right to free speech. That's what libertarians believe in. Free speech gets so muddy because, well, yeah, you can't delete comments because, oh, you're violating their rights. Well, that's not really a right.
Mhm.
Um, maybe I'm not going to generally delete comments that are just ideas. If someone wants to talk about socialism and promote that, or if they want to make a case for transgenderism, I'll have a conversation with them. It's
Mhm.
when they get insulting, I'm not violating their rights to delete it. I wouldn't be violating their rights to delete the stuff I don't like either, but
Yeah.
I generally don't personally.
And
But
I think that we can make
um,
we can make this distinction that libertarians love and everyone else hates, but is really important to discussions like this, that there is the right that you're talking about here, which is extremely specific and derived entirely from right to person, right to property, and that sort of thing, and right to non-aggression. But then there's also this broader principle of free speech, this more or less, say, liberal idea that the best way to come to the right conclusions is through discourse and discussion, and that freely exchanging ideas is amenable to that. That I think
and it's a good
is
thing. Yeah,
yes, I think that is mostly and usually correct. Now there might be exceptions, maybe,
yeah.
but I think that is mostly and usually correct, and that is, I think, the kind of free speech that Charlie Kirk was championing as well, because at any point, at least the private colleges that he went to could have just told him to leave. There would have
Yeah.
been nothing, strictly speaking, wrong with that. But I'm glad they didn't. And not even just because I agree with everything that he said. I'm glad they didn't because he was getting people thinking.
Yeah.
Even if occasionally people were challenging him and they were right to challenge him.
There's not enough of that on college campuses.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. Don't I know it? Yeah. Anecdote, I suppose. But I'll try not to get too off topic. But it wasn't Charlie Kirk. But when Kate Bennett, if you remember Kate Bennett, she's with, I think,
That
Liberty
name is very
Hangout.
familiar, but I can't
She's with
put any
Liberty
kind of
Hangout.
picture to her face.
It was she also did this sort of thing, going to college campuses and just kind of inviting people to debate and discuss. When she came to University of South Florida, where I was teaching that semester or that day, there was essentially a riot. There were crowds of people in academic areas, and this was in 2020, so there weren't supposed to be crowds of people, and they weren't supposed to be on campus, and they weren't supposed to be in academic areas, and they were
Well, COVID doesn't
crowding in.
spread for left wing riots, though.
Oh yeah, that's right. I
That's the
forgot.
scientists. The
Good point.
scientists confirm that.
Good point. I almost forgot. But they were like crowding in, shouting, throwing things, and this was directly beneath my classroom where I was trying to teach. I I thought at that moment, this is why the Democrats are going to lose this election, because this was like a month or two before the 2020 election. No, maybe I was a little early with that prediction. Maybe it took longer for them to get insufferable enough that people had just had enough of it and had seen it.
Assuming the results of the 2020 election were
Well,
legitimately broadcast, which is questionable.
yeah, there's that.
Different conversation.
Another time. Hey, at least we won't. At least we are past the point of being banned on YouTube for mentioning anything like that. But
Yes, yes. Of course, the official narrative is true, always true, and never even slightly deviating from the truth. So
absolutely,
we would never
completely.
question that. YouTube algorithm and moderators.
Um, anyway,
um,
right. Anyway, anecdote aside.
yeah, go on,
Yeah.
Kate Bennett. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
but yeah,
I had just kind of had this thought that at the time the in many cases literally violent opposition to competing ideas, just talking. I really thought that would come to a head and that people would just say enough is enough at some point and just completely reject that idea. It took longer than
yeah.
I thought. And quite frankly, there's still a large contingent of people who think that way, one of whom presumably just shot Charlie Kirk. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I will say, thankfully, I think that is on the decline.
I
Um,
think in
I
2020,
hope.
especially, there were a lot of people who just felt like the riots, the lockdowns, everything is just miserable. I don't like it. I just want it to stop. And if I vote for the Democrats, it'll all go away.
Mhm.
And I think that was the thinking of a lot of people. Just talking to people on the ground that I know were voting left. Uh, that was kind of my impression that they felt like they were hostages, and if they just give the hostage the person keeping them hostage what they wanted, then it would all just go away. And it didn't. It got worse under for 4 years,
Right.
and yeah, they realized, okay, we can't do this now. Regardless whether the results were legitimate or not, that was the motivation for
Yeah,
people.
I will say I
Um,
predicted at the time. You can go back on my Facebook feed and call me on this if you want. The day after the election, or sorry, the day the election was called, um, I I immediately started predicting that COVID restrictions were going to evaporate because the whole point
yeah,
was well, the whole point of a lot of these restrictions was political maneuvering on the part of the Democratic Party. But
yes,
wow, I was way off. I was way off. They had gotten a taste of power and didn't want to let it go. So
yeah.
is
No,
what it
why
is.
would they? Well,
Yeah.
if you read the UN Agenda 2030 or 20
Yeah.
Agenda 21, it was. And
Yeah.
that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I remember back in 2012 just thinking how nutty Agenda 21
Mm-hmm.
sounded. There's no way this is true. And I went to the UN's website and said, oh, it's
It's
right
right
there
there.
on the website. It's
They're quite
public.
public about these things.
And quite frankly, the lockdowns very much felt like a big step towards what Agenda 21 wanted. Locking everyone into 15-minute cities and at limiting what we can do and where we can buy stuff, and it really felt. I'm getting on topic of this a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely felt like interesting timing on everything. How given that thing. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I don't like conspiracy theories, but sometimes it's just like
Well,
you see,
sometimes there's a conspiracy.
you know enough that you can connect dots, and it's
Yeah.
just deduction. It's like, well, okay, it's
Yeah.
hard to not see the big picture here and just
Mm-hmm.
recognize it looks like something fishy's here. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's all just coincidence, but it's hard not to see the coincidences. And
Yeah.
when you follow the news enough.
A
Um,
favorite character of mine from Star Trek, Garrick, plain simple Garrick, said, "I believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen every day, but I don't
yes,
trust coincidences."
yeah, that's good. That's good. I like
That's
that.
I think the
And I
best
remember that
approach to these sorts
character,
of things. Was that?
CDS9.
Yeah, DS9.
DS9 with
Yeah.
I'm
The
I'm only like 6 episodes into DS9. My wife and I are watching it
ah
through right now, and
oh
I've
good.
never
Yeah.
seen it through before. So this is my first run, and it's
I
both of
think
our
he at
first
least
runs.
appears in the first few episodes, so you've probably seen him, but he hasn't had a major role yet.
Yeah, I don't think he's a major role at this point, and we're pretty early in.
Yeah.
But so as far as hate speech goes, I think we both agree. Me from I come at more from a property rights angle, where it's just
Hmm.
you have a right to say this. Now companies can say, hey, I hate what you're saying, so I'm not going to hire you.
Hmm.
But the government can't come after you and say that's hate speech, and whether it's hate speech against a political party, a person's identity, a person's ethnicity, or a person's religion, you know, we have every right to hate that speech, but it can't be punished by the state.
Right.
I definitely don't endorse, speaking hatefully about people on those grounds. I think that people have a right to their religion. They have a right to you know, be the race they are or ethnicity they are, and that's fine. You shouldn't discriminate on those grounds, on any of those grounds that I mentioned. But if someone does, the government can't come after you for it. It shouldn't, at least according to the First Amendment.
Right.
Um, and
It
according to
is
natural law, property rights.
right, and again, according to natural law, it would be criminal for the state to do so. No, I
And
think we can
interestingly
say
enough,
that.
the Ninth Amendment, really does protect property rights, and the
Yep.
Ninth and 14th Amendments
What's
really
supposed to?
kind of apply to the states. Now, the Ninth Amendment gets ignored by the Supreme Court as if it doesn't even exist. But
Mhm.
if we're counting the Ninth Amendment, property rights are absolute, even with the federal standards. And 14th Amendment applies that to the states as well. And realistically, the absolutality of property rights is constitutionally recognized. And the founders, I think, would have agreed with that. But in practice, the Supreme Court just ignores the Ninth Amendment unless abortion's it on the table, and it's left wing justices. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
I digress again. But yeah, so I think we both agree on hate speech. I think
Mhm.
that's a coherent case for our audiences why hate speech shouldn't be punished by the government, although why individuals can discriminate against people's speech they don't like.
Mhm.
Uh, Incitement's more tricky, and you and I have come out on different ends of this, and
Mhm.
I am very tentative. I think most of my views are tentative. I'm always open to change, um, I'm tentative on this. I tentatively think that incitement is a thing. I'll just give my 2 cents with it because you're probably going
Go
to have
for it.
more to say on this. I haven't studied it like you have. I'm not the philosopher. I'm just an amateur that likes reading in my spare time. So my thoughts on incitement are a couple. I look at um, on the one hand, if someone's just saying, you know, I don't like that party and I think someone should do something about it,
Mhm.
it's so vague. And I could see, a pedantic government going after those people and saying that's incitement. But, like what Trump said on January 6th, like, nah, there's no way that can be considered incitement. I'm not a big fan of Trump, and I would have said I would have been okay admitting that he did incite if he had, but I don't think that was his intention at all. I think anyone watching the whole context, that's not what happened. But um, but there are contexts where you have like politicians, for example, on the left in 2020, openly encouraging riots. And then when people were getting arrested, they were bailing them out and saying go back and do it. You go back and do your thing. You guys are exercising your rights. Show them what you want by throwing bricks through windows essentially. And they're not pointing to any pursuit. They're not saying you over there, John, you go throw a brick through that window over there. But they're clearly encouraging insurrection in 2020. The left was, and it was happening. The cities all across the country were on fire. I mean, Chaz over in Oregon was
Mhm.
literally an anarcho-tyrannical communist, like independent state for a little bit because they had quarantined off the city with communist guards and were shooting people trying to get in and out. I mean, people died there, and the left was encouraging all of that.
Mhm.
In my mind, like you have whether it's news reporters or politicians or just public figures or people that are maybe in the crowd that have influence. That that seems to me to be a violation of the NAP, which for those who aren't listening to that non-aggression principle, you cannot aggress against me. I cannot aggress against you. It is a right to not be aggressed against, a negative right to not be aggressed against. It seems to me if I incite a riot in your town and your property gets destroyed as a result, I bear some responsibility for that. Now, granted, people have free will. I agree with that. But it would seem to me that I encouraged it, I called for it, I got the crowd riled up to go do it, and sent them out there, hypothetically speaking. Then stuff gets destroyed. I bear at least some culpability for that in a legal sense. I think as having violated the NAP, the aggression principle. Um, Not as much so if I say, Vincent, here's $5, go throw a brick for that window, and
Mhm.
you do it. That's like directly hiring you to do something.
Right.
Uh,
I think we
you
can
still
both
had
agree that
agency
that
in both
is.
cases.
I think we could both agree that that is, especially given the exchange involved and the explicit agreement,
Yeah,
that confers responsibility. Right. That's
right.
criminal.
even if I didn't pay you, I think there'd be responsibility. Even if I just said, "Hey, Vincent, I think you should throw a brick for that window here. Here's a brick. You throw it for that window." I think there's involvement. We're both parties to that crime. Even if you're the one who
Yeah.
ultimately did it, and maybe you have more responsibility, there's still some level of culpability on my part that could be legally prosecuted.
I think that there would
In a
need to
natural system.
be. I think there would need to be a little more than, "Hey, I think you should," because I think that is still couched as a kind of suggestion, or
But
a
where,
kind
where
of
would you draw the
idea.
line then? I guess
It would
when
be.
would it become
I think it would have to come down to something like perceived authority or mutual agreement, right?
okay?
So if I am, suppose I'm your employer, right? And so we have this sort of pre-established relationship, and you get off your shift and say, "Hey, after your shift tonight, can you start throwing bricks through the competitors' windows for me?" I'm not saying you have
Yeah,
to,
yeah, okay.
right? And I can kind of try and hedge that, but given something like a pre-established relationship and the implications that come with that, I think that might have to qualify. Um, Now, I will
Well,
say,
there's a transaction there if a job is actually threatened. There's a
yes,
transaction being taking
right.
place.
Oh, in that case,
And
absolutely,
I'll let
especially if
you
it's
keep I'll
explicit.
let you keep your job if you do this. That
Yeah,
that, that is a transaction. And I
especially if
think
it's
that might
explicit.
not
Yeah,
be the best example, just because if we're trying to cut the transaction from it, then I don't know if that's the best example. But
yeah. And I mean, there's even
uh,
kind of a transaction if you just hand me a brick and say, "Hey, there's a window over there. It'd be cool if you smashed
go
it."
do it.
Right? Even you
Yeah,
just sort of supplying it with the intention of me doing it, there might be something there. So I'm open to that.
yeah. I
I'm
think
open to
you're
that.
in, and so yeah, this comes down to like if I supply the bus a bunch of rowdy individuals into a city,
Hmm.
is that much different? And there were all these riots. There was always pallets full of bricks
Yeah, if you
wherever
just so
the
happen
rioters
to
were,
leave
were
your
dropped
pallet
off.
full of bricks in an area where you know for some reason there's going to be a riot in the near future.
Right, and that was happening. That was happening in
Oh yeah,
2021. Of course, it's a slightly different than it. We're not talking about incitement in general, and it's slightly different than
yeah.
what we're talking about with the situation it's currently in hand with the right trying to now go after
Hmm.
incitement, where you have left wingers saying because the example we've seen thus far has been the left, and it's always the left.
Hmm.
It's for whatever reason always the left doing this. Although the right did go after incitement, which was January 6th, the claim that Trump was inciting, but so it does happen on both ways sometimes. But
Well, I mean that was claimed, but I think that's a really implausible case.
oh,
I
I
can't think
agree
of any
too.
real
I agree.
plausible cases of
Even if
incitement from the
incitement
right.
is real, yeah, even if incitement was real, I don't think Trump did it. But
Hmm.
there was a case of the right being accused of it. But it's
Yeah.
always the left that's doing it. It seems like or being accused of it because
Ooh,
they are.
ooh, I've got
Um,
one. I've got ideas. There are, I think, cases where you can make a good incitement case on even on the right. FBI entrapments.
yes,
I think that might do it.
yes,
I think that might
that's
actually
that's
do it.
that's a great
And
example.
I have a hard time arguing against that, and partially just because of my extreme bias against the state and state agencies. I really, really want to blame the FBI for those poor troubled
Is
souls
that a
being
cognitive
convinced.
dissonance, or is that actually a
See,
rational argument against it?
see, I don't know. That's actually a good question. Um,
Because
yeah.
because from if I'm playing devil's advocate and putting myself in your shoes in the
Hmm.
conversation from this far, both here and off camera, it would seem to me that your argument would allow for entrapment from the FBI, and I agree with you. I don't like entrapment from the FBI. I
Right.
think that's incitement. You have examples like the Iranians that the FBI got under the Obama administration, where there was
Oh, right.
Iranians
Yeah.
trying to blow up. I think it was the Federal Reserve building, and they posted all over the headlines that the Iranians tried to send 2 spies into America to blow up the Federal Reserve building, and the FBI released their official report. And when you read the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, it just reads like the FBI caught some spies.
Hmm.
When you read the official report, this is not conspiracy theory. This is public information. You can go to their website and find it. When you read the official report, they were just two random Joes that happened to live in Iran, and they uh, talked to them, presented the case to them that you should come over and do this. We're I forget how they did exactly what they presented themselves, some kind of authority that was hiring them to do this,
Hmm.
paid for the tickets over here, gave them all the supplies to do it, and it turned out to be a fake bomb or whatever.
Yeah.
And the FBI does that kind of thing all the time, where it's like there was never any chance of a real terror attack happening. These people were literally brought over here for the purpose of arresting them, doing a crime that would not have happened in any way, shape, or form had
Right.
they not been brought over.
Right. And I
And
think that there's okay, so there's a couple of elements in here that I think it takes it beyond what you'd call incitement, in the strict sense, where you
yeah,
can tie direct responsibility. One, provision of resources, right? I think that's a big one. I think we kind of have to hold on to that, right? If I
yeah,
just tell you,
that's fair.
you have a gun, I think that guy, I think that you should shoot that guy with it. Right? I'm giving you there, I think, I don't know, maybe we can agree on this, that I think in that case, I think I'm just giving you an idea. I'm giving you a bad idea. And it's up to you entirely whether to act on it or not. Now, I shouldn't say that, given that it's a bad idea. But I don't think it's criminal
Right.
in that case. But if I hand you a gun and say, there's a guy over there that you should shoot, and here's why, and I give you a whole list of bad reasons that you are likely to believe, given that I have supplied you the means of acting it out, there I think I have to hold some responsibility for not just for supplying you the means, because right, gun shop owners are not responsible for murderers, right? But
Yeah.
but a gun shop owner might be responsible for a murderer if a guy comes in and says, I'm going to shoot my wife, what's the best gun to use, right? Or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So the other element, which I think is important but can't stand on its own, is that in entrapment cases like that, rather than pure incitement cases, that the agents responsible, broadly speaking, or whatever, are a but-for cause of the action being done. Right? It would not have happened without their intervention.
That's fair.
Right.
That's fair.
And their intervention specifically for that purpose as well, right? Because you can have other but-for causes that are incidental, right? So the take the if you remember the plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. If you remember that.
Right. Yeah. We're all but one. It was like all but one of them was an FBI agent.
I think
right?
there were two who
It was
weren't.
like 11, it was
if I
11
remember
or
right.
12 people that were involved in
Yeah.
that. That was what they reported all over the news. 11 or 12 people tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, and it turned out that all but one or two were FBI agents. It's like
Right.
there were only two guys that weren't.
Right. And so the agents involved there were the but-for cause of the plot going off at all. Like the I think it was two guys, but you might be right. Maybe it was just the one. Absolutely would not have.
I don't remember for sure.
Whatever it was, the innocent guys who got talked into it would absolutely not have done anything like that had it not been for the other FBI guys trying to convince them. Right now, if you want to stretch a but-for cause, and this is a nasty thing to do, and this is actually something that I've actually talked about this concept a little bit before in a previous video, and because I will say Zionist shills abuse but-for causality a lot in a lot of cases, because you could also say, well, Gretchen Whitmer being governor was a but-for cause of this plot going off, because it wouldn't have happened if she weren't governor. Okay, well, shut up. Right? No, yeah. Kind of, but
we're going to have a separate episode on Israel sometime. By the way, that would be a good.
I'm sure.
Good. The theology of that whole situation, as well as just the on the ground. Scenario.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've talked about it a couple of times in videos. I did a sort of response analysis to a Dave Smith video where he was responding to some Zionist on TikTok or whatever. Where I kind of thought he was making some unforced errors because he was kind of falling flat on some philosophical and legal issues here and there, but I thought it was one of those cases where I think he was ultimately correct, but not necessarily for all the right reasons, and so there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, something.
Yeah,
like that.
I think we can have a fun conversation in the future if you're ever up for it. Yeah. The theology of it is fascinating too, because you have the two covenant theology a lot of Protestants hold to, and you have
absolutely.
You have the continuationist or replacement. There's a lot of different theories around that, and what the Catholic Church uses is fascinating. And I think the right answer, but it's worth discussing because a lot of people have it wrong. But it's more nuanced than people may think. Anyway,
well, and I will say to tonight's topic, I know Charlie Kirk was largely a dispensationalist, at least historically speaking. I don't know. I know that he was sort of evolving on some of the subjects surrounding Israel. I don't actually know if that was.
Yeah, I'm hearing claims, and these could be wishful thinking. I'm hearing claims that he was actually like on the cusp of becoming Catholic. I know he had debated.
Hmm.
And I watched a little bit of this. He debated with Michael Knowles
Hmm. Yeah.
on Soul Couture at one point, and it was interesting stuff. So Michael Knowles is
That was when he said the thing about
good.
how Protestants don't talk enough about Mary, which I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. And when he started
And
praying the rosary.
Michael Knowles was not the best debate partner for. I mean, he's a good guy, but he's not competent for it. Now, I don't mean to say he's incompetent in general. He's just not competent
I
for
I
that
always
debate,
say
I think.
Michael Knowles just wildly oscillates between saying things that are actually surprisingly insightful and clever and
Yeah,
the stupidest thing I've heard all day. Like
right.
he
I
does
love
both.
that he tries, though. I love that he is using his platform uh, to try to present the faith people and try to do so reasonably.
Hmm.
He with all due respect to him, because he's the man in the arena, and I'm just some guy watching with a 10 people that follow my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
but like with all due respect, as the guy on the sidelines, if I was to take my advice, I'd say he needs to sit under someone like Jimmy Aiken or Trent Horn or Joe Heschmeyer for a bit and learn the arguments, which is actually what, to his credit, uh, what to his great credit, Charlie Kirk was doing, and he was
Oh
being
yeah.
mentored by
Hmm.
the Turk.
He was
Kirk
scheduled
is
to
a
go.
great apologist.
I forget if he was
He's
scheduled to go
Protestant.
on or to have on Bishop Barron. I think like this
And
week.
Charlie Kirk, he was going to be on. He was
Yeah.
going to be on that. Sorry, I mean, he's going to be on Karen Bertuzzi's channel apparently too.
Oh wow.
Talk about
I didn't
some of
hear
the
about that,
stuff.
but wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but
There is certain
the,
credibility to the rumor that he might have been moving towards the church. So
his wife said he prayed the rosary all the time too.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I found it interesting. That's often wishful thinking. Like Rich
Yeah.
Mullins died, and everyone said he was about to become Catholic, and I personally do buy that. But it seems like a lot of people die that are kind of like friendly to the Catholic Church, and everyone just jumps on it. He would have become Catholic if he lived another year. C.S.
Well,
Lewis being
maybe.
another good example. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think Rich Mullins probably. Charlie Kirk, C.S. Lewis, they didn't make any public statements to that end, so I don't know about that. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Although I will say,
But
being married to one that has some influence. So there's some
it does.
credibility
It
there.
does.
There's some credibility there.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd say the same about
For
Dave Smith,
sure. That
frankly.
is Dave Smith married to a Catholic?
No, but his wife is, and he has been taking at least the idea of God more seriously gradually as he's had kids. So there's hope.
Interesting. I don't know anything about his religion. I didn't know if he was Protestant or Catholic or atheist.
He
Um,
he was so he tells the story better than anybody can, but he was always an atheist until his daughter was born, and then he just sort of
okay. I
started
think I
believing
have
in
heard him
God,
say
but
that.
not anything particular. So
Yeah, he's a theist like Jordan Peterson.
mhm,
Um,
something like that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good step forward. But yeah, still there's further ways to go. But yeah, so more to say on incitement. I agree with you. Bring material cause to yeah. If I'm inciting, it needs to be something that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been there. I think that's a fair thing to say. I think
Yeah.
it's a fair thing to say. To be a legitimate violation of the non-aggression principle of an act, it needs to have been something that wouldn't have happened had I not been there.
Hmm.
Now that I could see going in a bad way though, because well maybe it just happened because yeah, maybe I didn't say anything that was intended to incite, but I just made a passing comment, and that got the conversation started that turned into a riot long after I left.
Right, and I think it
It's
has to
like
be okay. So I think that's why you have to
it
have
needs to be
the
direct cause, directly causal,
right. Well, it has to be intentional.
and with the intent. Yeah, with the
Yes,
intent,
exactly.
directly causal with the intent.
That's
And
that's
that's difficult
crucial.
to prove. I'll admit that's difficult to prove.
Yeah.
In any kind of just court system, that would be very difficult to prove.
Hmm.
But I could say if you could prove it, perhaps I admit it. Perhaps I
Right.
say, yes, I was trying to incite a riot in this context. Perhaps, yes, I would say I was trying to incite some kind of violence in this context. Well, okay, I've admitted it, and I did it, and it happened. Okay, well, in that case, I would say it is a violation. You are trying to incite someone to, or a group of people to do something
Yeah.
uh, that would violate the rights of another.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that or a great example of excuse me, a way that you could prove that is if there is some kind of documentation that was what you were setting out to do.
yeah,
And I think that would show up for like the Antifa case is a great example of that. That I think
yeah,
that well, I mean, even if you remember that article from 2020 after the election, that whole like the shadow campaign to fortify the
Yes,
2020 election or
that
whatever.
was
Yeah.
a Time magazine article, I
Yes.
believe.
Yep. Time Magazine. That one. A lot of people in that article who were interviewed for it and who were contributing to it came out and said, well, we were, they essentially admitted to being direct but for causes of a lot of the riots. And then also on the flip side of it, causes of there not being riots after the election because they essentially turned it off. That
Yeah.
speaks to a kind of involvement that is ultimately coordination, right? Rather than just,
And the
saying something
circumstantial evidence that the
inflammatory.
riots stopped after the election.
Mm-hmm.
There is, and despite popular culture saying, "Oh, circumstantial, you can't hold that against me." Yeah, circumstantial evidence absolutely can be used in court,
Mm-hmm.
and an entire case can be built and prosecuted and won on circumstantial evidence alone, justly so.
Mm-hmm.
So circumstantial evidence absolutely can be used in court. So when you have circumstantial evidence
There
of the
has to be
fact that
more
they
of it
not only
sufficient to prove the
there's the
case, but
confession, which isn't circumstantial. The
mm-hmm.
confession is direct evidence, but then the circumstantial evidence that what they confessed bore out in the facts that it happened while they were doing it. It
Mm-hmm.
stopped happening when they said they stopped when they stopped doing
Right.
it. Yeah, so that's the circumstantial where okay, it lines up with the timeline. It
It,
could
it
be coincidence, circumstantial, but it lines up with what they confessed, and that lends to the case that they were doing it.
mm-hmm.
They're not just playing it up as if they were so important and you see what we did.
It shows or at least strongly suggests a causal connection. And that's what circumstances can help to prove. So yeah, I think so. In a case like that, yeah, I would. I think I would concede that would be something like incitement, criminal incitement. Um, but again, where you were urging caution is the flip side of this, right? Because there were a lot of people, if you remember back to all the way back to 2015, when the riots on college campuses were really starting to kick off because of conservative speakers, there were a lot of people arguing that people like Milo Yiannopoulos were inciting riots by being provocative.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. And they were saying the Proud Boys were inciting violence by being there,
yeah,
with their gear on and whatnot. And I don't have a strong opinion of the Proud Boys. I haven't followed them too closely, but from what I understand, they were just there to protect conservatives if there were to be violence against them, and
right,
that's all they ever did.
yeah.
But
And that's actually
I
really
could be wrong on
interesting.
that.
That's actually a really interesting possibility. Can you incite violence against yourself? Do you think? What do you think? 'Cause I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's similar to saying, "Go on, punch me. Come on, punch me, man. You know,
Yeah,
you do it. You see what happens." I mean, is that inciting? In some ways, it is.
yeah,
The question is, I mean, at that point, if you do punch me, so that's the thing. If I say, "Come on, Vince, punch me," you won't. Vince, you go ahead and punch me. You go ahead, and take a shot, see what happens to you. I mean, yes, I am inviting that,
mm-hmm.
and if you punch me, I kind of got what I deserved. I kind of
Yeah,
got what I deserved. In fact, I'll tell you a story, a little embarrassing story. When I
mm.
was a kid, I was probably like 12, but someone said, "You know what? I'm going to punch you." And I said, I thought I'd be a tough. I'm like, "Go ahead." And they punched me right in the face. I'm like, I guess I can ask for that. Like literally, literally
yeah,
ask
yeah.
for that. So I'm like, I learned my lesson. Don't be an idiot. But
Yeah,
it's like, what can you say about that? He punched me in the face after I told him to. It's like,
yeah.
so
I
you
mean,
learn,
actually,
live and learn.
there's another great example of
Uh,
this. There are a lot of people who are now claiming, falsely, they're wildly misinterpreting it, but they're claiming that Charlie Kirk incited his own assassination by his support for gun rights, which is obviously wrong. The question is, where's that
right.
line? Right? The question is, where's that line? Where do we
And
draw that?
it's a difficult question. It is a difficult question. But I would put this as one of those things where I do think, and this falls into some of the gray zone of libertarianism as a whole. Talking
Mm-hmm.
about in the past last episode, I think we talked about this. Maybe with someone else I talked about this with, where the when does property become abandoned? When does property start? There's been
Yeah,
some difficult questions that libertarianism. I think there's good answers, but that's we always start with the presupposition of property existing and being owned by someone. But what about that question of when is something considered homesteaded? When is something that was homesteaded
yeah,
now considered abandoned? That's
right.
a difficult question for libertarianism to answer. I think there have been good answers. Locke had some good answers for it. I think that the development of thought since Locke has only gotten better to answer the question, but it's still a bit of a murky area. And I would say the same thing for here. Incitement, in my mind, I think there is something called incitement that is a real violation of an app. I think that's a real thing. Now, where the line is where it gets a little bit more murky. And at least in the literature I've read and the things I've seen and my own thinking, it's still a gray area. Now, maybe Rothbard has an article on this, maybe Hoppe has an article on this that just brings absolute illumination to the topic, but I have not yet seen it if there is one. But I think I can say, at least in my instincts and what I see in my own reasoning, I think I see that there is something called incitement. And it is a
Okay.
violation of NAP. But where the line is where it gets more tricky.
Yeah. I think you might have convinced me. Still keeping some caveats because I can't just give up.
Yeah.
But
And I'm
okay, I think you
too.
might
You
actually
might
convince me
convince
of
me
this.
otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, so okay. Let's walk through this a little bit because I think you might be right that there is something like incitement. But I think that so we can list out some things that we might be able to figure out based on our discussion so far. It has to be causal. Right? There has to be some contribution to the actual thing being done, whether that's a but-for cause, whether that's material contributions, whatever. There's got to be some kind of actual like documentable cause. It can't just be a suggestion. There has to be something like intent, and that has to be provable somehow. Even if that's difficult, I think that would be a standard. I mean, proving crime is a lot of times difficult, but you can do it sometimes. The other question, I still am not sure where I stand on the inciting violence against yourself. Can you do that? Does that count? Because like even the like, hey, punch
It's an
me
invitation
thing.
at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you're inviting
Like,
them.
okay.
To me, now, can you accidentally incite violence against yourself? That to me is more obviously no.
Right.
You
I
know,
think you're right.
I
I
said
think you're right there.
something. I said something that someone didn't like, and their response was violence.
You had no reason to
I remember
expect that.
there was a big news story a couple of years ago of two men who were of the more criminal persuasion
Mm-hmm.
uh, in how they appeared and how they behaved, uh, beat the tar out of a Kohl's employer, the Macy's employee, because they thought they heard him say a hateful word against them. And
Okay.
it turns out they were wrong, or at least there's no evidence that he did. And he said he didn't. But
Okay.
a lot of people were saying, well, he incited the violence against himself by virtue of having said that bad word that we're not supposed to say. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, I mean, even if he did,
Hmm.
he wasn't looking to get himself beat up. He wasn't trying to get himself beat up.
Right.
You can say things to people. If I can say, Vincent, you're a despicable person. Maybe I'll use some harsher words than that, bad word for that.
Right.
And your mother smells in elderberries. Whatever. Well, I'm being gentle here, but
Right. And I may
say
retaliate with
say
a
something
cow
harsh.
launched from a catapult. You know how it goes, right?
You, you're more than welcome to respond with some mean words about my mother smelling of elderberries or something of that
Yeah.
effect. But you're not welcome to punch me in the face. That's
Right.
not an invitation to punch me in the face. Interestingly, though, there is quite a bit of precedent to the contrary in U.S. and common law,
Yeah.
but I would say it's wrong.
And I think
In
it's
fact,
I tend to agree.
the culture of honor in the Appalachian Mountains
Mm-hmm.
back in the 19th century and even into the 20th century was pretty much recognized as like you insult that guy's mother, of course you got shot, like that you got
Yeah.
reserved, and the judges would rule in favor of the person who did the shooting in those cases. So like there is some interesting precedent in U.S. law and common law courts, but I would say that's just wrong. Those courts were
Yeah.
wrong in that case, but it's still
I mean, there's
an
also
easy topic.
there's also the case of an action being criminal but understandable, right? A sufficient insult might get you punched, even if it shouldn't. You can kind of anticipate that though, right? And it's
There's a
probably
level
wrong
of
to
too,
do, and
like
yeah, you should probably be charged for it or retaliated against or defend against, but it's understandable doing so. Doesn't mean it's right, but
well,
it's
and
understandable.
there's two damages too. So let's say
Right.
the classic the classic man says something insulting to a woman, and she slaps him in the face and walks off, storms off. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, she assaulted him, but like, where's the damage? I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
if he had a red face for 30 seconds afterwards, and that's the worst that can be said
Yeah.
about it, it's like there's nothing criminally wrong there. I mean,
Very different from being shot. Right.
very different from being shot over something similar to that. You know,
Mhm.
so yeah, I think there is damage has to be taken into
Yeah.
consideration. Yeah, she was wrong to slap him. She violated the nap, but beyond some social pressure, it's really hard to really kind of say anything to really do anything about that.
Yeah.
And not to mention two guys too. You and I you know, shooting the breeze back, drinking some beers, and maybe I say something off the
Yeah. I mean,
cuff that was insulting, and you give me a punch in the yard with a stupid thing to say about your mom. Okay,
yeah.
well, like, yeah, maybe you violated my rights, but like, okay, I man, I have to just deal with
But
it.
you're
There is a
pretty okay
level of
with
like
it,
minor,
right? At that point, it
yeah,
becomes mutual combat, even if it's one-sided. I think
fair
something
enough,
like that.
fair
Yeah.
enough.
Sure.
Which
Let's go with
which
that.
in the libertarian society, duels are legal.
Right.
Uh,
Right on.
so my feeling is this: um, you, being the individual online, have publicly made a statement that is horrible,
Mhm.
and either celebrating the death of someone or, if we go back to other earlier events, encouraging riots and celebrating the riots, or calling for the death of people. You're making public statements that
Well,
indicate you are
well,
an
let's
unstable person, a
let's
violent
just
person.
keep it to non-criminal speech, just for the sake
Yeah,
of
oh yeah,
simplicity, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm saying non-criminal. For the purpose of
Yeah.
the argument, it's not incitement. It's
Gotcha.
not
Okay.
It's not incitement in the sense of violation of the NAP.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So
Okay.
they
Cool.
haven't violated the non-aggression principle, aka the NAP. To remember that not everyone knows what the NAP is, so I'm trying to clarify when I say that term.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's not a
Not the
violation
thing
of the
you're about to take
non-aggression
after we're
principle.
done. No.
Yeah, and not, yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, but they're still doing horrible things. Maybe
Mhm.
they're saying horrible things about a certain race.
Mhm.
Maybe they're saying horrible things about a certain person. Maybe they're celebrating death of a certain person. Maybe they're celebrating riots and encouraging riots online. Whatever it is, it's not criminal per se for the sake of the example, but it's horrible. And
Mhm.
you're revealing to the world about yourself that you are a despicable person by encouraging and supporting this stuff, and maybe even an unstable person that wouldn't be safe. I heard about a Microsoft employee who was celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, and they waited to the weekend to fire him. He's like, "Oh, well, they waited till I was off on my day off to fire him." It's like, yeah, because they didn't want you to shoot the place up. They
Mhm.
waited till you were out of the office where it was safe to fire you because you revealed you're okay with murder when you disagree with people. So
Right.
I would say charity demands that if one of the people on my friends list says it's okay that Bob, this Bob Smith, we'll take out a real example, gets murdered. We can say each other, it's fine, doesn't matter. But he's saying about this person, it's okay that they got murdered. It's good that they got murdered, or it's good that it would be good if someone did murder them.
Mhm.
Even if it's not a crime, you are revealing about yourself by saying to the thing that you are an unstable person that's okay with murder. And charity demands, if I see that, to warn the appropriate people that Bob Smith thinks it's okay to murder people he disagrees with,
Yeah.
and that would include your employer. That would include your any immediate relations that may be at risk,
Mhm.
of that. It's charity. Now, could I do that on a bad motive? Some people say, well, it's a sin if you're doing it out of vengeance because vengeance is the Lord's. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm
Probably.
doing it out of bad motive. Let's say I am doing it out of bad motive. The right thing for the wrong reason, as G.K. Chesterton said, it's better to do anything worth doing is worth doing poorly.
Right. Yes.
You should still do the right thing, and if your
Mhm.
motives aren't the best, you should work that out with God. And I agree. You shouldn't be doing it out of the heart of vengeance and wanting to see people get it. That's fine. I agree. That's not a good motive, but putting the motive aside, it's still the right thing to do. If your heart's wrong, work out your heart, but still do it. Yeah, I think that I would say that doxing can do more. Now, I'm not advocating hacking into servers
Mhm.
and accessing private messages and accessing private computers and things. I'm saying people have voluntarily put this information out there on some kind of public platform, have advocated for something despicable. Um, the employer has every right to fire them for that. That's not a violation of the migration principle.
Hmm.
I have every right to tell the employer about it. That's not a violation of the migration principle. And since they are revealing about themselves that they might actually be murderous, I frankly think I should. That's charity. That's charity to the employer. And also, I think it's charity to the individual that they see they're crazy. They're free. They've allowed themselves to be so given over to hatred and the enemy. And I think it's
Yeah.
demonic. I think it's demonic. I'm not saying they're possessed, but they've allowed themselves to be so given over to the enemy that they now think murder is good and acceptable. There needs to be some kind of social consequences from that because social consequences are the only thing that's possible when it's not a crime.
Hmm.
And that can help them see, and this goes back to excommunication. It helps them see, Paul talks
Right.
about giving them over to Satan so that they can be, in 1 Corinthians 5, you give the man over to Satan so that he can be saved. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're cutting him off from, in that case, from the Eucharist, but there's some kind of social context in order to help them see your sins are grievous and they're having grievous context on the uh, community.
Hmm.
And you need to repent of that so that you can be back in communion with us. And that's why it's important to have social consequences. It's
It
not just
shows a
being
mirror
mean.
to
And
your sin,
yeah,
essentially. Yeah. It
yeah,
allows
yeah.
you to see it.
It's not just I want revenge
Hmm.
on them for being meanies, and it's not just I'm going to be mean because I'm yeah. I think this is part of
Because I don't
unfortunately
like
the
you.
result of feminism. The role of feminism in our culture is really kind of yeah, the very feminine desire for mercy to not to be mean. Everyone's go along, get along,
Right.
just be passive and pray for them, and there's a place for that. But when the women when the feminine mentality wants to take over and the masculine um, instinct for justice and for doing something about it is suppressed by society, this stuff takes over.
Hmm.
When
Well,
men take
even
the lead,
I will say,
and
even there's an element of feminism as well to the um, doxing and whatnot out of vengeance, because it's a kind of relational aggression, which is a sort of toxically feminine way of um, dealing with problems in the wrong way. Now, again, even if you're right, and even if which I think you mostly are, um, and even if you should, out of charity, inform people of the dangerous nature of people or whatnot, anything like that.
yeah,
Like you said, you can do that the wrong way, and I think doing that the wrong way is this
I,
kind of toxically feminine relational aggression type of thing that we often hear
yeah,
about. So a couple
yeah,
of things that I'm not sure about. I want to see
yeah. I
what
want to
you
hear your
think, and
thoughts.
maybe we
Yeah,
can work through it. So one thing is the publicity of the information. Does that matter? Right? So if you tell me something in confidence, like, hey, if you tell me how much you hate your boss and sometimes you really just think about killing him, is it doxing if I tell him that? Or does the same
well, there's
reasoning
two
apply?
questions there. There's two questions there.
Hmm.
There's the I tell you in confidence that I don't like my boss and I think he's a jerk.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
okay,
even you tell me in
I
confidence that you
told
don't
you.
like Charlie Kirk and you think he's a jerk and it's great that he died. And I say,
Let's keep to the boss. Let's keep the
yeah. They're two
Boston
separate
play. I
cases,
think
but yeah.
that's because we're using there's a couple different examples, a couple different answers. So the boss. Let's start with the boss and let's give scenario one. Scenario one.
Hmm.
Uh, I tell you, I don't like my boss. I think he's a jerk. John is just such a jerk, or I don't know, Bill. I think I'll try to use a name that no one in my company overly works for that name. You know, uh,
Oh, yeah.
uh, Stenopolis. I think he's a terrible guy. I don't know what it's they have a name, but he has to have a boss. Okay, that's all I said. He's a jerk. I don't like him. I told you in
Right.
confidence. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, you have a negative right to go and share that stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you contractually bound yourself to not sharing, you have right to share. Now,
Hmm.
but a social right, a moral right, I would say that you would be in violation of charity to reveal what you and I
Yeah.
on the back porch over a couple beers were talking about.
Right.
I would say that would fall under detraction. You've revealed something that the other person have a right to know,
Right. Yeah. Okay.
in a moral sense. Now scenario two, someone says to you, "I don't like my boss. I hate him, and sometimes I just think about murdering him." Okay, now we're on a different topic here. If
Hmm.
I'm serious, if I actually mean, not just because I've heard people say that I've heard people say that as like
Like
I feel like the one that's like
exaggeration. Yeah.
it's hyperbole. They
Yeah.
obviously don't mean it,
Venting.
but if they
Yeah.
actually mean it, or you think they actually mean it, okay, well, yeah, charity demands you reveal that conversation.
Right. Because then he has
Um,
a right to know
so
in that case.
he has a right to know.
Hmm.
And as far as you're talking with your best friend Tom on the back porch drinking beers, and he
Hmm.
says, "I know you don't actually have a best friend named Tom, so that'd be kind of weird if I just guessed that off the top of my head." But yeah, you're talking to your best friend Tom, and you're on the back porch drinking
Yeah.
some beers, and um, he reveals to you that what as much as I'm on the same page you politically, I just thought Kirk was a jerk, and I'm glad he got what was coming to him. Okay, you know, in that context, okay, he said a despicable thing,
Hmm.
um, and he revealed that he thinks a despicable thing. I think on the one hand, sure, man, you have a conversation with him.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
You say,
Absolutely on that.
okay, yeah, dude, that's not okay. Assuming he's a Christian, the Bible says over and over again in Jeremiah, especially Jeremiah 18, I think off the top of my head, I think 57. The Lord does not desire the death of the wicked. The Lord does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. Rather, they should repent. That's repeated in the New Testament as well. It's repeated, I think, in Ezekiel as well, a couple times in the Old Testament.
I know it's in
So
Ezekiel twice, at
Ezekiel
least.
18, yeah,
Yeah,
Ezekiel 18, I believe, yeah.
1828 and
So
2818, actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I
yeah,
could be off on that. Don't quote me. I'm
I'm,
Catholic. I don't know my
I'm
Bible.
paraphrasing because there's a couple passages, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple passages on that God does not desire death of the wicked.
Right.
He won't put out a smoldering wick.
Hmm.
He desires that all are saved. Again, if you are in the heart of Christ, if you are wanting to be conformed to the heart of the Father and wanting to be transformed into the image of Christ, you know, deified, so to speak, in the process of deification, to use the old Greek term,
Hmm.
um, you are outside of that. And I think there is a grave error taking place if you are celebrating the death of the wicked,
Hmm.
whether it's someone on your team or not, or celebrating the death of someone who's good, even especially. Um, you know, you are you are gravely contrary to the heart of the Father.
Hmm.
And there needs to be some, check yourself, go to a priest and confess that, and go to God and pray for Him to change your heart,
Hmm.
because that's wrong. Now, as far as you dox
So I
them,
think that
um,
that might qualify as something like a grievance that should be first taken to your brother, and then to the
yes,
church,
oh yeah,
and
Matthew
then
18,
ultimately to the
Matthew
community
18,
if need
yeah,
be.
and Matthew 18 is talking to church hierarchy, but
Yeah.
it definitely applies to a large degree to individuals.
Yeah.
It's a good principle. You go first to your brother, Vincent. I think you did something grievous there, and you keep doing it. Okay,
You really shouldn't say things like that.
yeah, I'm gonna bring
That's
Len
yeah.
along with me next time and say,
Yeah.
we both heard you do it. You see you do it. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it. Okay. You're still doing it. Okay, I think give a space to. It's not like the very next day go to the church, but
Hmm.
the very next day bring a second person. So you give us some space and
Right.
time
Yeah.
to think about
Yeah.
it. I think the scenario may play out a little more loosely where we have a couple conversations first about it, and then after
Right.
a while, you bring it to the second person, then eventually you bring it to the church. You know, and depending on the context, there may be multiple meetings in between, depending on how receptive you are in between. But then once the church gets involved, then it's like, okay, like, dude, you're rejecting the deity of Christ and you're calling for the death of all Trinitarians. Okay,
Hmm.
time to repent of that or be excommunicated.
Right.
So
Now,
like
if we
there is a
okay,
level
so
of
if we expand this out further, though, to something like it's not a personal conversation, it's still digital, it's still online,
yeah.
but there is something like an expectation of privacy. Like if I post something in like a
Before we get
private group or something like that, or in a group chat.
before we touch on that, I did want to say one more thing
Oh,
on that
sure.
on the
Yeah,
private
yeah.
chat thing. Because practically, I would say that on the scale of things, let's say that uh, your friend Tom, he
Hmm.
just is completely recalcitrant
Yeah.
and does not want to repent and insists on his way that he doesn't care. He's glad it happened. Okay, you're in this case. Should you dox him? He hopes it happens
Hmm.
again to X, Y, and Z figures. And he thinks it's right if someone does that. Okay, I mean, can you dox it? I mean, it's a private conversation. It's not being recorded. I don't know what
Right.
Florida is, but Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state.
Right. Yeah.
It's not admissible unless it's both parties consent to be recorded. So
What if it's over like text chat and you
how would
send
you even
screenshots or
dox that?
something?
Yeah, if it's over text,
Yeah.
it's one thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But if we're talking about
Just hanging out in the back,
just a private
talking
conversation
about it.
back and forth, there's
Right.
not really any way to dox it. I would say that would just continue with the Matthew 18 method of going to your brother with a second person. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe revisit the issue in a week, go back with a second person, uh, or even a third person, maybe the context, and then finally bring it to the church. I think that's a fair thing, or that also in that context too, you're getting witnesses. So
Yeah.
now you have two other guys with you that heard him say it. Well, now you do have evidence that you can present to the boss.
That's
Now
actually a
you
good
do
point.
have
Yeah.
evidence you can present to the priest. So there's that too.
Hmm.
So that would be my 2 cents on that. As
And
far
it
as
also, in that case, it becomes sort of more and more public and not just the sort of private conversation as well.
yes, indeed, yes,
He
indeed,
seems to be like more willing to express this more broadly, and that
yeah,
matters. I
which
think.
eliminates any concern of charity,
Right. I think. Yeah.
detraction on your part.
Yeah.
So then, as far as a text message or private messaging service,
Yeah.
let's say we're what is
Like a
P2P
group chat,
messaging?
or I was even thinking of like
Signal.
a private Facebook group or something like that, right? Where there is this
Yeah, sure.
expectation of this doesn't go beyond this specific barrier, but it's still to some degree public. That's a fuzzy area, right? And I think I'm okay
and we all
with
have our groups of guys that we text and share memes and things with. So there's a lot more of like, okay, well, this is obviously a private channel, but it's I think that in that case, let's just say it's a one-on-one chat. I think it's helpful. I think you would still follow the Month 18 thing actively if he's not actively trying to saying he's going to do this.
Mhm.
I would still follow that probably for a friend because I think
Yeah.
I've Terry demands it. I think the doxing and promoting it too. I think I have a right to share as far as a negative right. Yeah, sure, I could share it.
Right.
But I think with someone in the church, and we were talking about someone in the church,
Yeah.
you would go through the Matthew 18 process. For someone outside the church, I mean, that you're going to play that case by case.
Yeah.
I think that
if you think you can successfully approach them and reasonably, then I think you do have an obligation to at least try.
Yes.
But if that isn't plausible, then maybe not. Right? But I'll say this: I had a friend who was an old friend from college who used to be who's like one of those ex-libertarian types. I actually have a few ex-libertarian friends who've gone both directions. Right.
I used to be a libertarian, then I grew up. It's like, you mean then you started getting violence because he's with people?
Yeah.
It's part of the growing up. I'm sorry.
Then I realized I don't like fascism, and so I stopped being a libertarian. And that's this one. This one guy who's on.
One guy I talked to, a Facebook guy, literally told me I was libertarian until I took DMT, and then I realized what other people feel. Other people have feelings. That's what it took to get you back to libertarian. You broke your brain on drugs. Sorry, dude, but like that's not an argument. Sorry, go on.
He'd gone in the sort of leftward direction, and I reached out to him. I reached out to him privately, and it was like, dude, this is not who you used to be. And I tried that approach. Now, he didn't like immediately, recant and change his mind and put his Ron Paul posters back up or whatever. But maybe that maybe that sort of caring outreach by someone who at least used to matter, who we used to have a close relationship, maybe that will stick in his mind, and I think that is, even without doxing somebody, that approach can be more helpful, at least in a lot of cases. Now that said, I think your point about charitably sharing in more or less public information that someone has expressed about themselves that is relevant to them being able to do their job, interacting with other people, doing what they do, that actually, I think we do have something like a responsibility to do that, at least after an attempt at a real conversation. So I think that
I think so.
I think I'm convinced by that.
Going back to the,
and I've always thought, I will say, like, I have always thought, because I was raised this way, that anything on the internet, anything that you put online or even onto a digital device, you should assume that that is going to be seen by the entire world.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I've
And that's
never
fine.
had any notion of online privacy. I've always assumed that
Right.
was just a canard. Like, there is no such thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can take precautions and things you'd rather not be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you use DuckDuckGo when you're searching as awkward medical questions.
Right.
That kind of thing. But like generally speaking, it's like, well, you're asking DuckDuckGo, you're asking the internet an awkward medical question. There's a good chance it's going to get answered. You ask that question, maybe
Yeah.
not, but
There's no doctor-patient
maybe don't ask it.
confidentiality with Google. So no, of
Yes,
course not.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. But going back to the larger context of like, well, why aren't we? Someone might ask, well, why aren't we um, uh, doing that same principle with the individuals online that we're seeing randomly?
Mhm.
And maybe we are. Right? Maybe some of those people that you're in groups with, you might try to convince, but a lot of them are just public posts that you happen to see here and
Yeah.
there. You know where they work, or you
Right.
can easily find where they work. In that case, then I think that it's like you don't know them; they could be dangerous, and that's exactly why you're
Mhm.
you're, you're pulling it in.
And the
There's a very
chances
different
that they will
context
listen
there,
to you are next to zero, because there is no
next to
pre-established
zero.
relationship. I
And
think
that's
that
kind of like
matters
just
too.
war theory. It's like if there's
Mhm.
next to zero chance of being successful,
Yep.
it's no longer just war.
Exactly. Yep.
So we'll say not that we're going to war, but we're just talking about something of principle, of applying it to a relational standpoint.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's a very different scenario doxing someone that you just don't know that's publicly posting, celebration of murder. If they think it's okay to murder anyone they disagree with, which would include their coworkers.
Yeah.
Okay, well, like, yeah, tell their coworkers, tell their boss so that they know. That's charity. And if your intentions are bad, work that out with God, but still do the right thing and do the charitable thing to tell their boss.
Mhm.
And that's we need to get out. Like I said, we need to get out of this feminine thinking of or effeminate thinking as men
Mhm.
of
Good
don't be a
distinction.
meanie, just go along, get along. No, we as men, the Bible says Romans 13, the governing authorities do not bear a sword for no reason, and as men, we are the heads of our household that bear the sword of protection of our household. And in the context, the household is a building block of society. So the group of households also are bearing the sword for protection of each other.
Mhm.
And there is a defensive of each other as well in that context. That in some sense, the private citizen does have that duty to bear the sword of protection of the greater society,
Mhm.
and that would include, revealing crimes and things. So it's not just let the government take care of what's criminal and pray for them otherwise. No, no, like we as men have. I get yeah.
I
My
mean,
wife
still do
now
that,
she doesn't.
right? Still do that.
Let's
Still pray for them, and still,
yes. Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely,
also
absolutely.
part of part of the charity
Yeah,
involved is getting them to stop, getting them to change their
yeah,
mind if you possibly can.
and see consequences for it. Yeah, because consequences are just and good, and those temporal consequences can bring them to repentance. Like I said, First Corinthians
Exactly.
15 or 5. I mean, sorry,
Hmm.
or is it Second Corinthians 5? I forget. It was one of the
Yeah.
two. It's one of the Corinthians 5, where it talks about giving them over to Satan so that their soul can be saved.
Hmm.
There is a sense of the temporal consequences can lead to repentance, and
Yep.
that needs to happen. And as men, as head of the household of our own household, we have a responsibility to protect our families in the society we live in, which includes protecting the society to some extent. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, we have a duty now. Now, my wife, she doesn't need to be online to meet these people. She doesn't need to be online doing this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
She can live out her domestic calling and be at peace, protected in the household under the umbrella of my headship. That's
Hmm.
fine. But as men, you and I have a duty to be involved.
Just to clarify,
Um,
I assume you don't mean we have a duty to read Twitter all day and go after people who say bad things, right?
Yes, I did
Okay.
not mean that. I did
Okay.
not mean that. No, I'm talking about
Yeah.
incidental in the way you see these things.
Right.
Now,
There you go.
maybe
If you
now
encounter
this
it,
is
you
one
have
group.
a duty to do something about it, but you don't
Yes, yes,
have a
indeed.
duty to go out and seek these sorts of things,
Yes.
because that's not
Now, more
psychologically or
power to the
spiritually
people that
healthy, right? Typically.
not necessarily. Now, there was that one group. I forget what group it was that created a database of over 20,000 names that have
Oh
called
yeah.
for that have called for the support of the death of Charlie Kirk and called for more.
Hmm.
And whoever's doing that is doing it for charity.
I think so too.
In one sense, they're just scrolling Twitter all day, but I think they're doing some charitable work in their free time, and that's fine.
I don't
There's
know if
nothing
that
wrong
was
with that.
Libs of TikTok, but I know that Libs of TikTok has been doing a lot of this. And I think that, I think
Yeah,
that is. And now I think that there might be some resentment involved there. But also, like you said,
it,
if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And even if she's doing
yeah.
it badly,
Work on your heart. If
mhm,
and I say this to my audience, you all need to be praying for these people who are in such depravity they think murder is a good thing.
mhm,
Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. The Bible says it talks about the God having given them over to depraved mind in Romans 1. Because they've given their level of rejection of God comes to the point where you actually are given over to depraved mind. You're in a state where your conscience now actually thinks evil is good and good is evil.
mhm,
You're in a very sorry state, and like the Fatima prayer, pray for us sinners, or it was, oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven, especially those in most need of thy mercy.
mhm,
God wants to pray for especially those in need. It's Paul. Paul was a murderer. The apostle
yeah.
Paul was a murderer. He was assassinating Christians, and he had people praying for him, and
And then
he
look what
was
happened.
converted and
Yeah.
became one of the greatest apostles,
Hmm.
possibly the greatest
So,
apostle. That's debatable, but he became a great apostle,
mhm,
and that's that. We should pray for that for every one of these people. We should be praying for Tyler Robinson and
mhm,
praying that he's
yeah.
converted and becomes a remarkable witness in jail
Okay.
for Christ.
There was something that
But
I forget who said this. There was probably a few people who said it, but pointed out that if by God's grace, Tyler Robinson, the presumed the again presumed assassin, um, if he were to come to Christ and seek forgiveness, somebody pointed out that Charlie Kirk would be thrilled to see him in heaven.
yes, he would be. He would
Yeah,
be. I've seen that post too, and yet I agree.
yeah,
I agree. That anyone who's in heaven would be thrilled to see another sinner that's been saved.
absolutely.
That's just the reality, because anyone who's in heaven has had their heart perfectly aligned to the heart of the Father, and the
Hmm.
heart of the Father does not desire that any man be saved, any man be damned.
Yeah,
He desires that all men be saved. He calls all men to himself, contra Calvin. So
yeah,
the which is biblical. It's in the Bible.
absolutely.
It specifically says he calls all men to himself.
A lot
So
of things
so much
contra
for
Calvin are in the Bible. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Most of the Bible is contra Calvin.
Hmm.
But
So
Romans 9.
I'll
Another
so I want
conversation.
to end on something. And
Yeah.
so I want to kind of bring in my patron saint, uh, to whom I have a particular devotion, having picked him when I was 13, and I thought it was really cool, and the bishop
Who's
had
your
never heard
saint? I
of
don't
him.
even know who it is.
Saint Drosinus of Soissons.
Oh, I should have done that. It's your
It is,
profile.
yes, it is my saint name that I go by on social
I
media.
didn't
So
mean to ask you how to pronounce that. Thank you for answering that
yeah,
question without me
Drosinus.
having to ask.
So Saint Drosinus of
Exodus.
Soissons was a 5th century bishop in southern France in Soissons.
Mhm.
And he was most known for establishing monasteries and parishes against the will of the pagan king at the time, the local pagan king.
Okay.
And he did this
So much for Romans
through,
13.
well, yeah. Well, he did this through essentially just doing it, and then, at least the legend goes, and then just sort of getting away with it by talking the king out of killing him for doing it.
Okay.
And so he is the patron of invincibility and thwarting the plots of one's enemies. And again, you can see why at 13 I thought this was the coolest thing ever, right?
That's cool. That's cool. I like
I
it.
still
I
agree,
like it.
but the the devotion to him, such as it is, which is quite rare, but mine at least, a large part of it is praying through his intercession that our enemies fail in their plots against us. And it's not just for our own protection, it's for theirs as well. Because if
Yeah.
someone means us harm, it will be better, not just for us, but for their soul, that they fail.
Yeah. Even if they're going to hell, there are stages of hell. And better they commit less mortal sins when they go to hell
Yeah.
than more, because you'll be in a deeper spot of hell if you committed more and worse mortal sins than if you committed less. So yes, for
And
sure.
the failure to commit some grave evil, even if you intended it, even if you are guilty for the sin of it, is all the more chance to turn to God. And it's all the more
Yes.
chance to repent. It's far easier to repent of something that you tried to do than something that you actually carried out. And so we should pray for not just those who persecute us, and not just so that they will fail, which sure, that too, and not just so that they will come around, but also that their plans might not succeed, that they might fail, so that they can realize what they ought to have been doing and what they ought not to have been doing, and so they can return to God.
Yeah. Yep. So I think it's a good note to end on, and I agree. We pray for these people, pray for Charlie Kirk and his family, especially his daughters, but especially Kirk as well. I don't know if he's in purgatory or he's straight to heaven as a martyr, which is
We'll
a
talk about that
question we're
next
going to
time.
talk about, whether he does
We'll
he count as a martyr.
we'll
I
do
say
another one
yes.
for that, because I do want to talk about it, but it's late.
Does he count as a Christian martyr, and could he be a saint? Are two fun questions that fun questions. I mean, it's a tragedy. I don't mean to make light of it at all. That's not my intention. I'm exhausted right now. Did I mention I already got 5 hours of sleep a night for the last month? Sorry,
Yep.
but I would like to discuss that again, because I think
Absolutely.
it's a quick answer. Honestly, could he be a saint? But I've heard a lot of people ask that question, and I'd like to answer it. And is he considered a martyr? My opinion is yes, but I'd have to go back and forth why. And if your opinion is no, that'd be a good conversation.
I will say I'm a little more skeptical on the matter, but I'm persuadable. So we'll see. It'll be a good discussion regardless.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So we'll have to plan that sometime soon. Yeah, I'd love to do that again soon. But while the issue is still fresh, I think it's a good question. Some people's minds. I'm seeing a lot of people ask, could he be a saint? And
it's a good question.
I'm going to say I'll explain my answer in our conversation later, but I'll spoil it. That my answer is yes, he could be declared a saint. But I'm not going to tell you why.
Pray for him
because
anyway.
The why is complicated.
Pray for him anyway, just in case. That's what I
pray for him anyway. But here's the thing: is even if someone's not declared a saint, they can still be in heaven.
Right.
You know, I personally believe Dietrich Bonhoeffer, for example, is in heaven. He's one of my favorite Protestant martyrs and Protestant saints, if we can call him that. You know, he's never going to be declared a saint because he's Protestant. But you know, someone like that probably is in heaven. It's just that they're outside the church, and that's an unfortunate state. But they gave themselves to Christ, and they died with what seemed to be, you know, ignorance of the fullness and seeking God as best they could. I think there's a good chance for that person, and we can trust they're in heaven. But you know, could they be formally declared a saint is a different question. My opinion is yes, and I'll give the answer why next time. So we'll have to leave it on a little cliffhanger there.
All right, I can't wait.
All right.
Yeah, well, hopefully you guys watching will also be looking forward to that.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a good talk on a tragic topic, but I think that these are necessary things to talk about going forward, and I think a lot of what we talked about, it can we drew inspiration from what Charlie Kirk said over the years as well, too. So
yes, indeed. Anyway, watch his videos; they're great. I don't mean in any way to make light of this whole scenario by you know, at all. It's definitely it is a tragedy. It's sad, honestly. Just seeing the videos of him with his kids is just it's tear inducing. It's just horrible. And you know, pray for his family, pray for his wife, pray for him, and pray for his killer and those who are celebrating if they be saved as well. Which is what he'd want, I'm sure, based on what I've seen of him. That's what he'd want.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. On that note, we'll have to have a future conversation in the near future.
We'll do.
And in the meantime, like and subscribe, and donate to Vincent's Patreon or whatever it is you use, Patreon or Coffee. I'm not sure what.
I use Coffee or Ko-fi or whatever. Yeah. I have my. Vincent, I'll say I have my moral beefs with Patreon from years ago.
Yeah, well, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Give Vincent copious amounts of money, and like and subscribe to both of our channels.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you next time.
Have a good Wednesday. See ya.